Hey friend, welcome to Healthy with Heather Brown. If you don't know where to start with balancing being healthy and loving the life you already have, I got you, friend. And yes, of course, we're still going to enjoy some Chick-fil-A. I'm here to come alongside you and encourage you to fall more in love with your creator, your spouse, your kids, and your own health journey. We'll talk about how to let your good things grow until they become daily habits, with the occasional dad joke and point of view from my Yankee hubby, Eric. Don't stress. Let's hop on this hot mess express together. So join me, Heather Brown, as we unpack what it looks like to live a life well loved. Okay, hey everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Healthy with Heather Brown. I am so excited today to welcome Lindsey to the podcast. And you guys, if you have not heard of Lindsey, we actually met because I was on her podcast probably 2 years ago at this point, which is so crazy, mid 2020. And so, Lindsey, will you say hi and welcome to the show?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here and listening. Thanks for having me, Heather.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited to have you. My husband, Eric, has been excited for you to come on as well because I told him about how you and your husband do the sex and intimacy courses, which I'll, of course, get you to deep dive into. But I was like, you finally get your chance. We get to talk about sexual health on the podcast. You're welcome.
Yay. And then now he can listen in. I should have had Jesse join me.
Oh, yeah, you should have. Well, Eric and I do a marriage corner at the end of every episode. So I told him that he could come up and he'll usually bring like a random question to the marriage corner. And so I was like, you get to bring a sex question. You're so welcome. So anyway,
Perfect.
but Lindsey, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and maybe just kind of like what your day-to-day looks like.
Sure. So I am a mama of 2 boys, 5 and 7, and a wife of almost 11 years. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, right outside of Nashville. And we moved here about a year and a half ago. We kind of uprooted our lives because we really just wanted quality of life. We were running ourselves ragged with my husband's business and just didn't feel like it was a place to raise our family. And so we quite literally just said, okay, let's just go. And so we packed up everything, moved across the country away from all of our family, everything we ever knew. And it's been one of the best decisions of my life. Our boys are thriving and it's just Franklin is, if you haven't visited, it's just like one of the coolest, cutest little Hallmark towns ever. It's just very dreamy. So we're really happy. I have been blogging for about 7 years, started my podcast, and then it was with the co-host. And then I started my own, the Living Easy podcast, which is near and dear to my heart. And as I kind of navigated that, I really wanted to dive in even further into marriage because I just really started feeling this tugging on my heart. And I'd been doing marriage coaching for a while. So we jumped in. My husband decided to leave his job and he had just been like, when I tell you hustling, like it was just too much. It was so overwhelming. And I was like, I can do this. I can let you stay home. I can figure it out. And so it kind of just like, I put my feet to the fire and I was like, I'm just going to try it. So I launched my first marriage course and God blessed it so much. And it just took off. It's called the Wife Project, From Roommates to Soulmates. It's been purchased by women in almost every country in the world, which is just why. Thank you. I mean, for me, it's so humbling because for so many reasons, but just to see women in, Africa and South Africa. All just these places where it feels so far. It just shows that God allows his word to spread through his children. So yeah. And then I launched the Sex and Intimacy Project. Then I launched a business course teaching people how to do what they do. And it's just been a really cool journey for us, for me specifically, and then also for us as a family.
Yeah, no kidding. Where did you say you moved from?
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Albuquerque.
So
okay.
Desert to lush greenery, which has been wonderful.
Yes. So I'm actually coming in your neck of the woods this weekend. Some of my best friends actually live right outside of Franklin and they used to live in Franklin. So we love it. It is so cute. And we just love Franklin. So that's awesome.
Oh, I hope you have so much fun. That's exciting.
Yeah, we're going to go to a Preds game. So it'll be a lot of fun. We're looking forward to it, the whole nine. So anyway, do you have a favorite coffee shop or like lunch spot that we should check out while we're there? Because, my boys are 4 and 7, so they're very close in age to yours.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love McGavick's because it's right off of like the cutest, dreamiest hotel. So you have to go into McGavick's and have coffee and like maybe some breakfast. And then you can walk in and see the hotel because it's just wonderful. But then it's right in the heart of downtown Franklin, which is the best place to be. I just feel so sweet and cozy. So I would recommend that. That's one of my favorites, but I work there like almost every day.
That's awesome. Well, then maybe I'll run into you if you're there on Sunday after church or something. That's so fun. Well, that's really neat to hear. And I just love hearing how the Lord has blessed what you've done. And I think that that's something that's really cool, especially in this online space, because people always say, like, how did you and Eric like take that leap of faith? What did that look like? And I just remember he'll always say, like, we took a leap of faith, but it also was very much like we planned, we budgeted. There were all these conversations that went into it. But he'll say, like, honestly, God has just done more with Heather's business than we could have ever imagined or dreamed. And so it's just really, really neat. Like you're saying, like the Lord does not let his word return void. And so even like just getting to do this podcast, like we just launched in August, and I have just loved the intentional Christian conversations I've gotten to have. There's something powerful and cool about it. So I'm really, really thankful that you're on to share about it too today. So
yeah. Well, and I'm so proud of you. I think one of the biggest things that I like to talk about on the Living Easy podcast and just in general is the power of doing things that scare you. Because I lived a life where I was so intimidated. I had such a crazy fear of man. And it's not that I've overcome it quite yet. I'm navigating it thanks to counseling. But I feel like I didn't do a lot of the things that scared me because I like feared people's opinions so much until I don't know what it was. I think that it was just conviction and a whole lot of repentance where Jesus just called me up away from that. And I've just kind of started living in that verse that God does not give you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And believing that and embracing that has compelled me to do the things that I'm most afraid of. And I mean, when I tell people, I'm like, blogging terrified me. The podcast terrified me. That's why I had a co-host initially, because I was too scared, like afraid to do it alone.
Sure.
Courses took me 3 years to finally launch what I had been dreaming of. And to see what God has done in all of them just shows how much fear can hold us back from, because had I never started, none of this, he would have never used any of these things. And so I always ask people, like, what scares you the most? Jump into it. Like, do 30 minutes of that thing every day and see what God can do through you, because it really is a waste of your gifting and your ministry when you don't embrace or put to life what he has given you and equipped you with. So anyway, all that to say, very proud of you.
Hi, friend. Are you enjoying this episode? Hit that plus sign in the top right of your Apple Podcast app, or the follow button in your Spotify app, or wherever you're listening. That way you automatically get each new episode without having to search for it. You're welcome. Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And I just am so intrigued to hear too, like, what did it look like for you and your husband when you first started taking those leaps of faith? And also, I think women are always like, okay, so you blog and you do a podcast and you're an influencer, but like, how is that a job? Like, how do you start? Do you mind kind of just speaking a little bit about what y'all's journey looked like with that? And then, Lindsey, I just saw on your Instagram that you were just posting about like not being afraid to start doing courses. Can you just speak a little bit to the business mindset for women that are like, yeah, I am scared to start, but I would like to contribute somehow to our family?
So this is something I have a course, it's like 11 modules called Permanently Profitable. And I dive in fully into making money via social media and then course creation. I teach people exactly how to do that and then also how to do social media. So for resources, it has everything I've ever done to be successful. But what I will say is there are so many avenues to make money online. And I'm learning this because I work with a lot of people in media. And it's just given me hope because I have a lot of friends, especially coming here. Franklin is the city of drive. Like people are motivated. It's like the 5th wealthiest county, which can be really, I mean, it can cause a lot of struggle and vanity and striving. And so we've had to guard our hearts against that a lot.
That's a good reminder right there. So thank you for speaking that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to compare and to feel like you need to reach a level on the totem pole and it's so empty, because when you get there, you just want to get higher. It never ends. And so for us, like it's been constantly having to reroute our minds into a place of eternal perspective rather than worldly success or its ministry. But with that said, like we still want to provide for our home. And the Proverbs 31 woman was a faithful woman who cared for her home and had her own business. She was an investor. She left early in the mornings, like when her children were still sleeping, to go and do those things. So it's a really good example to remember that it's not unbiblical or unmotherly to run a business. So when we first started, with blogging, how I did that was I started sharing regularly. And I was very blessed that I sent it to a magazine and they picked up the article. And then
Oh, wow.
with that, other like digital magazines see it. So like Relevant, Focus on the Family. So then they ask if they can share it and then they link
Sure.
your stuff. So then I became like, they basically just said, will you be a full-time contributor? So anything I wrote on my blog post, I would share for them, which it gets them views, but then it also gets engagement. Like it helps to build my engagement.
Yes.
So through that, I built my blog views pretty substantially. And anybody could do this. Anybody can pitch to an online magazine if you're writing because they need content. So then I was able to apply to an advertising platform. I use Mediavine. You do have to have a minimum number of page views. But with that, I mean, that brought in just in ads. Like that's why everyone's like, gosh, why do bloggers write their whole life story on a recipe? That's why, because the more you scroll
Right.
and the more ads you see, the more money that you make. And so, I mean, it really is an annual salary if you have solid income or if you have solid content. And so
Page views. Yes.
yeah. So I posted all my blog posts to Pinterest. Pinterest is the most underutilized platform from creators.
I agree with that.
Yeah. It's a search engine. Like it's so powerful. So anyway, that started bringing in a good amount of income. I did commit to not monetize my podcast. That was just my own personal. I've done it occasionally for like, I think maybe 4 times in the past 4 years, but that was just because I know I get distracted very easily and I wanted my content to stay on par and not to veer off into something else. So this platform for me is the Living Easy podcast is not monetized aside from me sharing my courses and the stuff I've created for my audience, which
Sure.
tends to be great marketing.
Yes.
And then with online courses, that I don't know why I was so afraid of that, but I started reading stories and watching YouTube videos. And the Wife Project had been so heavy on my heart because every time I would post a TikTok video or a reel about wives, everyone would be like, well, yeah, that's great. But what about the men? Like, you need to speak to the men. Granted, it takes 2, it's 100 in marriage. But women were very opposed to hearing the work that they could do within themselves. And so it just prompted me to say, hey, the reason that my marriage is thriving and healthy is because we both self-evaluate every day. Like, how can I be better for my husband? How can I be better for my wife? How can I shift my perspective to one of selfishness, to one of servitude? And it's not easy. I mean, we're naturally inherently selfish people, but I think that made me want other people to see it in the same way because our society is like, if I'm not happy, get rid of it. If you're not satisfying me, get rid of it. I'm going to move on to someone else or go somewhere else.
Yes.
And it's such an empty perspective because this commitment is for life and your families are affected and you think it's going to get better, but then you just have different problems with somebody else. So you might as well navigate the problems that you have within your own marriage.
Amen. The grass is not greener on the other
No.
side usually. Like
Yeah.
obviously we're not speaking to things like physical abuse or things like that.
Or affairs. Yeah.
But it's just sad when you hear it so normalized now, even by celebrities. Well, I just wasn't happy anymore. And so I really had to follow my own inner happiness. Well, that is so anti-biblical. And obviously they aren't believers, but that is where it's like, it feels like a war on marriage and families right now, truly in American culture to me.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. It's just disposable. Like everything is disposable, but that's the example that's being set for young kids, and everything. Like even if I post anything jokingly negative about our marriage, because sometimes you have to create a little controversy on social media.
Oh, sure.
And
Yes.
it's always like, just divorce him. Like, he hurt my feelings this morning. Divorce him, leave him. You're a queen. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this rhetoric is wild and it's empty. And like, okay, I'm a queen and I'm going to be single and then search for another person. It doesn't actually logically add up. But what does logically add up is doing the hard work because you committed to this person for life. And I know divorces happen. I come from a divorced home, which is partially why I'm so passionate about healthy marriages. But Jesse and I aren't perfect. Like I've stormed out of my house before with a packed bags and said, I'm done, and even though we promised we would never say the divorce word, but I did. And
Right.
we're not perfect. I don't ever preach from a high horse. Like my podcast and everything I create is genuinely purpose with vulnerability to share my mess because none of us are free from it, but it's working through that mess. And so anyway, so sharing all of those things, God just blessed it. The course itself became my main source of income. Then we created the Sex and Intimacy Project, which was so fun. Jesse and I did that one together for couples. And it's more than just a sex course. It's about emotional intimacy and spiritual intimacy coming together in that place so that you have a thriving intimacy in the bedroom. And that's kind of my business journey in a nutshell.
I love that. Well, I think it's really cool for women to get to hear different aspects of it. So I love sharing, bits of mine, but it's always nice for people to hear like, okay, like we're talking about other real people that just are wives and moms like me, and you can make this happen. So do it scared, like Lindsey was saying earlier. And we'll say, we talked a little bit about how you have, married women want to talk about intimacy and sex and what that looks like. I do think kind of in the church, it can sometimes almost be like a taboo subject, if you will, especially once you're married and have kids. All we hear in church is like, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex, all growing up. So my first question about all of that would be, how can we facilitate better conversations surrounding the subject of intimacy and marriage, do you think, in the church specifically? And then also even in safe circles with our friends or small groups or what have you.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Heather. I think that this is something I say a lot is we're taught like sex is dirty. Don't do it until you do it with the person that you love. And it's such a skewed perspective because then you come alongside this person that you love and you have this very twisted view of what sex is. And I receive so many messages like that from girls where they grew up in the church and they feel like what they're doing is wrong. And even my husband struggled with that on our honeymoon night. He battled like feeling, because I brought some real cute lingerie and I was so excited to wear.
Sure.
And he was like, I have to be honest, I feel convicted. And I was so taken aback because I have a very promiscuous background. Like Jesus saved me at 19, but before that, I was very promiscuous, sleeping around, boyfriend to boyfriend, very dependent. And so I came in like, oh my gosh, I've been
guns blazing.
Yeah, because we waited. Like,
right.
We waited. And I was like, I'm so ready because that had always kind of in a skewed way had been my perception of love, like in a very skewed way, had been my perception of love. So withholding from that felt wrong to me, even though I knew it was good to wait. And so then when we got there, he was like, I have to just adjust to this. Like he genuinely didn't want me to wear lingerie the rest of the honeymoon because he was like, felt like he couldn't enjoy it. And so
sure,
we're way past that now. Thank God. But
I can imagine.
Yeah. But yeah, I do. I think the conversation needs to shift. And anytime I teach in churches, I say sex is beautiful. Like look at the Song of Solomon. He talks about her breasts and it's very symbolic of him just like rubbing his hands all over her body and foreplay and all those things. And if it's in scripture, why are we hiding from it? And why are we making it small? And a lot of it is fear of premarital sex and teenage pregnancies and all of that. But a lot of the people, especially youth, the things that they do because they don't understand why they shouldn't. And growing up for me, I was told don't have sex, but that was it. Now, like I talk to my boys already about it. And because the first time boys see porn on average now is age 8.
It's insane.
My son's 7.5. Yeah. So I'm like, we're going to talk about it. And it is a beautiful thing. God has created it. It is sweet. It is lovely. It is intended for you. It's intended for you and your wife because you don't want to give away your body or your heart to someone who isn't fully yours. And I was almost engaged to someone other than Jesse. And I always say, had I given myself away to him, he would have that piece of me like, oh, this is a done deal. And he ended up cheating. And we weren't engaged, but like called off the plan. We were looking at rings.
Sure.
And I would have given myself away to that person that I thought I was like so sure of,
Wow. Yeah.
So I just wish that it was more of a conversation of like, no, this is a gift. It's a joy and it's lovely, but the person that is right for you will wait for that gift. And it doesn't need to be so secretive. Like the more we talk about it, the less taboo it becomes, I think.
One of the most popular questions I hear is, how do you do it all? Or can I pick your brain? And I always laugh because my knee-jerk reaction is, oh girl, I don't do it all. And now I have a way to let you pick my brain about my business. I have an incredible team of women helping me manage my crazy behind the scenes and keeping my life well loved and this podcast running smoothly. Because Lord knows I'd be a hot mess express trying to do it all myself. This year, I launched a course where I finally do a deep dive and share all the raw details about how I built my business and team to where it is today. My COO, Alyssa, and I recorded over 2 hours of video into 9 lessons to create a course that reviewers are saying is unlike anything else out there. Hey, their words, not mine. But hold on, the videos aren't all. I'm going to read you my list of what it includes so I don't forget any of it. There's a 28-page workbook with questions to move you from stuck as a solopreneur to thriving as a team, or even just hiring your first assistant, with smart goals and steps to guide you from point A to point B efficiently. A behind-the-scenes look at our application, hiring process, and critical onboarding process, my cannot-miss first step in hiring a new employee, and how to cultivate a team buy-in. There's a deep dive on my team's inner workings, our operating systems, favorite apps, and index full of time-saving tools we use to keep our team running smoothly. If you're ready to take your business, side hustle, or network marketing lifestyle to the next level and grow a team, I'm your girl. Head to www.mylifewellloved.com/team to grab yours today. So true. Lindsey, have you found any really good resources that you've loved to reference when you're talking with your boys about it, whether it be like books or, I don't know, a podcast or shows? Anyone that you like really look up to the way that they talk about having those discussions with your kids?
Focus on the Family has really great resources for that. So that's kind of my reference point. Authentic Intimacy by Julie Slattery is a really great podcast that has a biblical perspective almost always. So yeah, almost always. Just use discernment.
Sure.
But a biblical perspective on intimacy. And so it's helped me to just feel more confident in what I understand about it so that I can express it. It's not necessarily topically like talking to your kids, but I think we as Christians have a responsibility to understand what it is when everything in this world is sexualized, so that we can speak properly and wisely. I mean, it is one of the biggest topics, like sex sells. That's all this world is based around. So when we have a gospel perspective of it, it shifts the way that we can communicate with people and help them to see the goodness of God through it.
Yes, that's amazing. I so agree with all that. One thing that I heard you talk about recently, it was in one of your podcast interviews, I think in November. So you may be like, it's not applicable anymore, or what have you. But you mentioned that you've been struggling with depression recently. And I know that you had also mentioned, I think that you and I share in common that you maybe struggle with postpartum depression or anxiety at some point. I have struggled with postpartum depression. So do you mind maybe just sharing a little bit about that journey? And what does that look like with your spouse? Maybe in regards to intimacy in general, but then also obviously like your sex life. Like how have you kind of navigated what those boundaries look like with Jesse?
I did struggle with postpartum anxiety, depression. I'm now on medication, which has changed my life. When I tell you, Heather, that I didn't realize how much it had impacted me, like I would have never confessed this to anybody because I was like, this was in a season where I'm like creating wife projects and I'm doing all these things, but I would do them in spurts. And then the rest of the time I couldn't get out of bed. But I thought I was just tired and lazy. And like, I never knew myself to be a lazy person. So that should have been my first sign. But it had been 2 years since I had my son. And so I was like, I can't still be struggling with this hormonal imbalance, which is not true. You absolutely can be. But I couldn't, like, I had no energy to do anything. I would start a task. All I could ever think of is like getting back in bed.
Wow.
And I didn't feel necessarily sad. Like I wouldn't have described it as sad all the time. It was just low energy. And in the mornings, like Jesse had to get the boys ready almost every morning because I could not physically get myself out of bed before 9:00. And I missed so many days of them going to school. I missed so many days of making them breakfast and lunches. And Jesse is like, I mean, he was very open and loving and honest with like, hey, I just think small changes could make a huge impact. And I would be thinking, yes, but you don't understand that I physically cannot move my body. I feel like I have 10,000 pounds on my chest. Part of that being anxiety as well as the depression.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to just see what it is because there were days I felt really sad. And I started Zoloft and I started with 25 milligrams, one pill. And I didn't like see much of a change. I still had suicidal thoughts. Like I had moments where I was just thinking about driving my car into a wall, like as fast as I could. And I'd never in my whole life had never had thoughts like that.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm going to increase my dosage before something really bad happens to me.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I went up to 50 milligrams, and it's like night and freaking day. I wake up at 7 a.m. and I'm like, all the things, like, let's do all the things. And I'm with my boys. And like, my boys even used to make comments like, Mom, why are you always in your bed? And I would work from bed. So that was my excuse.
Right.
But I was like, I don't want my boys to remember me like being in bed. It's just shifted. It's like my energy's changed, my mindset. And I mean, I prayed for 4 years about starting this. Like if I could have prayed my way out of it, read my way out of it, worshiped my way out of it, talked to people about it, like enough to get it away, I would have. And I don't want to stay on it forever, but it's something that,
sure.
I mean, my whole family has noticed a massive difference in my joy and my, like, honestly, my willingness to live. And so, I mean, talking about kind of seeing it from, I haven't talked about it much, honestly, since I've been on this, but from an outsider's perspective, looking back, it was like just a dark, weird season where I was deceived into thinking this is just who I am, but not realizing how like that slow progression, you know, that frog, like you put the frog in boiling water, they don't realize they're boiling until they're dead.
It's too late.
Yeah. That's kind of how I felt.
Honestly, I'm just so glad that you're speaking to your symptoms and how you felt, because I think that was a lot of my mental hang up was I was like, there's no way I could be depressed. I'm a happy-go-lucky person. I'm a Christian. I'm a this, I'm that. So I think even just knowing and hearing different people in the way that experience it gives people insight to what be looking for. And I think it's so awesome how Jesse supported you. So that's really great that he was able to do that for sure. So one thing I do want to ask you next is I think all moms listening can relate to when we're going through all the postpartum changes, you're struggling with nursing, sleepless nights, healing from a C-section scar. For instance, I talked about I had a 4th degree tear, whatever your case is, the idea of feeling sexy again can be just really like overwhelming and almost feel foreign, maybe, especially if you're dealing with anxiety or depression on top of that. Do you mind just speaking to some healthy ways to communicate with your partner about how you're feeling and maybe how you guys journeyed that out? Wow, y'all, I am just so incredibly grateful for how raw and real and open and honest Lindsey is being with me in this interview. We actually, of course, ended up talking so long that I decided to break this episode into a 2-part episode because I know you guys are busy mamas like me and you don't have a ton of time. So I think that this will just be easier to help you guys get through her whole story, and it's incredibly powerful. And I know God's going to use it. So I do want to make sure I make it easy for y'all to digest. So you're going to love what she has to say about postpartum sexy time and communication, because communication is sexy, y'all. And that is what will be in part 2 of this episode. So please join us next Tuesday for the rest of the story. If you want, go ahead and hit that plus sign or follow button wherever you listen to podcasts, and you'll automatically get part 2 on your phone next week, ready to play for you. And I am just so pumped for y'all to hear the rest of this conversation next week. And y'all make sure to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Healthy with Heather Brown and let me know how I can be praying for you if you were having any of these same struggles. I would be honored to pray for you, friend. Hey, if you're loving the show, click that follow button on your podcast app. This will ensure you won't miss a single episode. I'll see you next time.